He was coming here, he was chatting, talking here, but we treated him like family. He was never treated badly. He ate, bathed, did many things here. He was at home, and we never investigated what such a violent person was doing.
Santiago Province, Argentina. On April 15th, 2020, in the midst of the illness we've been living with for some years, they found the body of Priscila Alejandra Martinez in a house in the Los Lagos neighborhood, a 15-year-old girl who had disappeared on February 23rd of that same year. The victim's body was buried in a 1-meter deep subfloor that the killer had made in his own room. The femicide perpetrator had slept for almost 2 months with the corpse buried under his bed. No one imagined that the killer of Priscila Alejandra Martinez would be someone so close to the family. In fact, he had even participated in the searches to find the young woman. The family members could not have imagined the motive he had for committing this terrible atrocity. Priscila was born on February 9th, 2005 in La Banda, one of the most populated urban areas in the Argentine province of Santiago. Claudia Martinez's oldest of 3 children is Priscila. No information was ever known about the young girl's father. What is known is that Claudia raised her 4 children as a single mother and with many financial difficulties. However, she worked tirelessly to ensure that Priscila and her siblings lacked nothing. When her eldest daughter grasped her mom's sacrifice, she yearned to help her in every way possible. In this way, the girl or the child began to take care of a large part of the household chores, such as taking care of her siblings, without neglecting her school responsibilities, of course. She was always described as an excellent student. However, she also began to do small cleaning or care jobs in other houses to generate extra income. Her mother did not agree with this at first. She only approved it after a lot of insistence on the part of the daughter, and when she saw that she continued to get good grades in school. By the year 2020, just before this illness, Priscila was 15 years old. Just before this illness, Priscila was 15 years old. Just before this illness, Priscila was 15 years old. Unlike many girls her age, she had no interest in partying or traveling. She just wanted to continue helping her mother and her siblings. In addition, even though she had just over 3 years left to finish school, she dreamed of going to university. But her dreams ended when an unexpected visitor arrived at the band. It is not known exactly when, but shortly before the young girl's death, Ruben Oscar Avila, Claudia Martinez's first cousin, arrived in the Los Lagos neighborhood, who is Priscila's mother. Known to his acquaintances as El Pelao, Avila arrived in Santiago directly from Buenos Aires, where he had lived for almost his entire life. At that time, the reasons why Avila left Buenos Aires were still unknown. The only one who suspected him from the beginning was Priscila's grandfather, Ramon Martinez. He didn't trust Ruben even a little bit and claimed that he was a bad person. Ramon believed that Avila didn't just join the band for no reason. He was running from something in Buenos Aires, something bad he had done. Either way, the rest of the family accepted him. The man, barely 24 years old, settled 3 blocks away from his cousin Claudia's house with some older relatives. Ruben used to go to his cousin's house often. He managed to get along well with the whole family and especially to create a bond with Priscila. In fact, the young girl always called him uncle and drank mate with him. For a moment, the family thought that the grandfather's suspicions had been premature and that Ruben only intended to integrate into the family. However, there were reasons to distrust as Ruben Oscar Avila was there to ruin their lives. The life of the Martinez family changed forever on February 23, 2020, when around 5 in the afternoon, Ruben Avila arrived at Priscila's house. The young woman's grandfather was sitting outside the house when Ruben parked his motorcycle. He called Priscila and told her that he needed her to wash his clothes as he had a large amount accumulated. He also asked her to do some sewing for him and assured her that he would pay her for everything. For her, it was nothing strange, as it was not the first time that her uncle had made such a request. For that reason, she got on the motorcycle with him. It was the last time Priscila was seen alive. That night of February 23rd, Avila returned to his cousin Claudia's house to spend some time with her. Priscila was not there, which caught her mother's attention as she knew that her daughter had left in the afternoon with her uncle. After asking him where she was, He replied that he was on his way home with the young woman. When they were 3 blocks away from arriving, she asked him to get off the motorcycle. He did not give more details. He only maintained that his niece had told him that she had something to do before returning home, but Avila never asked her what. This obviously caught Claudia's attention, as her daughter never had this type of behavior and always let her know where she was. Remember, she was a very conscious, very responsible girl. So immediately, Priscila's mother began asking the neighbors if they had seen her, but no one could give her an answer. Something definitely strange happened. So after a few hours, the woman went to report her daughter's disappearance to the police. According to Claudia Martinez's testimonies, the authorities did not want to receive the report that night. As is often the case in these types of cases, they told her that she had to wait longer. Anyway, they asked if the young woman had a boyfriend or any reason to leave the house without notice. Her mother denied both possibilities, and in fact, she highlighted that it seemed strange to her that Priscila had not even taken money if her intention was to leave. During the early morning of February 24th, the Martinez family began the desperate search for Priscila on their own. Ruben Avila, the last one to see her alive, was also helping to find the young woman. What a shameless person. Post-disappearance, Priscila's photo was circulated in the neighborhood, lakes, and social media. In it, you could see the young woman's arms with 2 tattoos of her brothers' names, Bastian and Benjamin, while her left shoulder had her mother's name tattooed. So the days went by without any news. The desperation and anguish in the Martinez family grew, and they had to deal with an unexpected problem that further complicated the investigation. And it is that on March 20th, 2020, as a result of this disease, the Argentine government declared a health emergency and quarantine. Several investigations were hindered by the limitations imposed by the pandemic. In addition, police officers not only began to contract this virus, but they also had to spend time and resources to ensure that mandatory social isolation was complied with. Regardless, those close to Priscila were not willing to let the young woman's disappearance become an unsolved case. For this reason, with the support of various organizations, the family began an intense social media campaign asking for Priscila to be found alive. This pressure was intended to ensure that the authorities continued their investigation, and indeed they ended up doing so. After a reconstruction of the events, the police had only one witness of vital importance to the case, Ruben Oscar Avila. Priscila's uncle had been the last person to see her alive. In his statement, Avila again said that on the day of the events, the young woman had gotten off the motorcycle 3 blocks from her house, but still did not explain why. It was not an obviously convincing statement, as it seemed strange that a 15-year-old girl would ask to be left alone at night and that the adult in charge would not ask anything about it. It was not logical. Regardless, the investigators considered that up to that point there were no proofs that directly involved Avila with the disappearance. Although the identity was not revealed, the media disclosed that the investigators had found another suspect for the young girl's disappearance. It was a teacher, father of a 10-year-old boy whom the victim had taken care of on several occasions while doing small jobs to bring money to her home. However, it turned out to be nothing more than a suspicion that was dismissed shortly after. As it turned out, this man had a solid alibi that quickly removed him from the case. The Human Trafficking Division of Santiago had also considered the possibility that the young girl was in some other province of the country, deprived of her freedom. In fact, they had discovered that during the month of January 2020, Priscila had been in Tucumán, supposedly on a family trip. Several sexual exploitation networks operate in that province. However, they quickly dismissed that hypothesis as there were no other clues linking Priscila to a possible location in another province. So again, everything led back to Ruben Avila, the last person who had seen her. But there was still no concrete clues pointing to a criminal case. That was until a strange discovery caused a drastic turn in the case. On March 7, 2020, Priscila's aunt, Ana Martinez, found a letter on the iron gate of her home. It was signed by the 15-year-old girl and had a message as forceful as it was confusing. "Hello, aunt, I'm pregnant, I'm not coming home, I've moved in." The victim's mother immediately asserted that the letter made no sense. I'll say it again, she was a good girl, she was a responsible girl. And first of all, besides, she said her daughter wouldn't be capable of doing something like that, as that kind of behavior didn't match her personality. Furthermore, almost convinced, she said that the handwriting with which the letter had been written was not Priscila's. For that reason, the band's fiscal unit, under the charge of Dr. Hugo Herrera, ordered that handwriting experts analyze the letter. The expertise quickly determined that it was not the handwriting of the missing young woman. It was clear the killer knew he was close to being discovered and wanted to mislead both the investigators and the family. Despite the fact that the country was in quarantine at that time, on April 9, 2020, Ruben Oscar Avila met with some acquaintances at a clandestine night party, the location of which was not specified. But on the morning of April 10th, an 18-year-old girl who had been at the same party went to report Avila, who had offered to take her home when the meeting ended. On the way, he proposed to be intimate, to which she
obviously
refused. And in response, Avila became furious and began to beat her and cut off her breath. He intimately abused her and then left her abandoned in the middle of the road. She was luckily rescued by a passerby who accompanied her to the police station to file a report. In this case, it was not a stranger. The victim knew she had been abused by this creep, by this predator. Within a few hours, Priscila's uncle was arrested for the intimate abuse, which, by the way, at this point in the case, the media differ in the chronology of some of the events, so it is not known if this information was discovered before or after Avila's arrest. Similarly, at that time, it was also proven that the accused often used another identity. He had various social networks in which he called himself Dario Navarro, and even introduced himself as such to the young woman he abused on April 9th, and also when he was first arrested. This prevented the information from being cross-referenced with Priscila's case after the abuse. Regardless, it is a fact that two situations occurred that led to the final stage of the investigation. Firstly, some witnesses who lived near Ruben's uncle's house claimed that days after Priscila's disappearance, the man carried out construction work at his uncle's house. For that, he bought lime, gravel, cement, and hired a mason named Ramon. But to the intimate abuse and the testimony of the neighbors, another revealing fact was added that allowed a judge's authorization to search the home of the missing young woman's uncle. The expertise carried out on the letter received by Priscila's aunt determined that it had been written by Avila. This was already a fact. Ruben Oscar Avila, known as El Pelao, had been involved in the disappearance of his niece. Now they just had to find her.
the police began procedures in the afternoon and arrived at this corner of the Los Lagos neighborhood, where they conducted a sort of excavation to find the body of this young girl with very similar characteristics to Priscila, so everything leads to presume that
it's her. On April 15th, 2020, around 5 in the afternoon, the major police operation began to raid the home where Ruben Avila was living, located at 302 Catamarca Street in the Los Lagos neighborhood. The police officers from the Human Trafficking Division of Santiago were received at the house by the suspect's uncles. After entering the place, they quickly noticed that there was a striking arrangement in the room where Avila slept. The investigators found a subfloor made right under the suspect's bed. Not only did it catch their attention, but the search dog also pointed out the place. They quickly decided to carry out an excavation in Avila's room, and so after breaking the recently built cement floor, the first thing they saw was a foot. A few minutes later, the naked body of a young woman matching Priscila's physical description appeared. To identify the victim, they first had to perform an autopsy on the body. However, there was no doubt about the young woman's identity, especially because of the tattoos with the names of her mother and her two brothers, which I had already told you about. So it was a fact Priscila Alejandra Martinez had been deprived of life by her own uncle Ruben Oscar Avila.
Yes, it's a pain for me because God has taken him from me, and well, I'm unhappy he's going to pay for everything. I have kept the promise. I have my 3 accomplished children. When he gets out of jail, I'm going to bow him down. I'm going to kill him with my own hands. I'm not going to avenge what he has done to my daughter because that's how it's going to be. I don't care if I get arrested, but he's not going to be alive after what he did to my daughter. And I hope they never let him out again. Let him rot for years. If he gets out, I'm going to kill him.
The first autopsy results were released on April 16, 2020. The cause of death was asphyxiation due to manual strangulation. No other signs of violence or intimate abuse were found. According to some media, Avila's uncles, who lived in the house where the femicide hid the body, were also initially charged with the crime as accomplices. However, there is not much information regarding that point, and other journalistic sources assured that Priscila's uncle was the only one arrested and charged with the crime. On the other hand, the autopsy determined that Priscila had died approximately a month and a half ago, which coincided with the date of her disappearance. However, there was a detail that made the case even more disturbing. As I already told you, some neighbors had claimed that days after Priscila's disappearance, Avila carried out construction work at his uncle's house, and they saw him bringing materials into the house for these jobs. These testimonies, which placed this moment between the last days of February and the first days of March, account for one of the most macabre details of this crime. Because before building the subfloor, Ruben Oscar Avila lived with his niece's body in his room for 1 or 2 weeks until he finally buried it. The case of Priscila Alejandra Martinez, as you can imagine, shocked the Los Lagos neighborhood. In fact, there were neighbors who blamed the young girl's mother for her daughter's fate and even threw stones at her house, claiming that due to her upbringing, the best thing that had happened to the girl was losing her life. These words are brutal. But at the same time, there were relatives of the young girl who claimed that Priscila could have survived if they had investigated in time.
And I had a feeling about all of this. I was going to file the complaint, and they told me no. They just said that the prosecutor hadn't given me the news that my niece was there buried under the bed when I had said I was going to go by because I had a feeling that she was there.
But beyond these controversies, the motive still remained to be known. It was known that the person responsible was a macabre and dangerous individual. The mysterious past of the 24-year-old man in Buenos Aires, the case of intimate abuse, and the femicide of Martinez were enough for investigators to consider him a perverse criminal. However, no one could explain why he had decided to take the life of his own family, his own niece, with whom he seemed to have an excellent relationship. On the morning of April 21st, 2020, this predator was arrested again, as he had previously been for intimate abuse with carnal access against the 18-year-old girl with whom he spent the night of April 9th that year. Shortly after, Avila was questioned by prosecutor Hugo Herrera. According to reports, the public defender's office advised the accused not to testify, but he couldn't resist, and during approximately 45 minutes of testimony, the man revealed all the missing details of this crime. He said that on the afternoon of that February 23rd, he went to see Priscila because he really needed the laundry and sewing jobs he had asked her for. Avila claimed that he had not premeditated the murder at any time. But after the two arrived at the house located on Catamarca Street, the victim first started washing clothes, then began to sew, sitting on the bed in her uncle's room. At one point, she ran out of thread, so she asked the murderer to go get more. So when Avila returned to the room with the thread and saw Priscila sitting on the bed, he claimed that she reminded him of his cousin Claudia, that is, Priscila's mother. What few knew was that there had been a big problem between these two people. The 24-year-old man said that during his childhood, his cousin Claudia had accused him of a theft he did not commit, and after the accusation, his family kicked him out of the house, which is why he had to live on the street for several years. That situation then, at a young age, caused him great suffering. For that stupid reason, he decided it was time to take revenge on his cousin for all those years. So he pounced on her young daughter, hit her on the head, and while she was lying in bed, he began to cut off her breath. Beyond revenge, investigators were surprised by the coldness, with which the murderer acted after the crime, as he hid his niece's body under the bed and returned to Claudia's house to have mate with her and create his perfect plan, his alibi. That same night, along with the rest of the Martinez family, he even participated in the first rounds of search to find the girl. He even lent money to his cousin for whatever was needed during the search. A few days after murdering his niece, he hired his friend, a bricklayer, and bought the necessary items to make the subfloor and hide the body. After the statement, Claudia Martinez said furiously that she had never reported her cousin, as both she and her entire family always treated him well. She even emphasized that she had never believed he was a violent person, despite the warnings the victim's grandfather had made as soon as Avila arrived in the neighborhood from Buenos Aires. Finally, the guarantee judge ordered the preventive detention of Ruben Oscar Avila, which in Argentina is a measure through which a defendant is deprived of freedom throughout the course of the process. The man was also prosecuted for the crime of aggravated homicide by treachery and gender violence. He was imprisoned in the male penal unit of the town, where he remained locked up until the start of the trials, both for the femicide of Priscila and for the intimate abuse with carnal access against the other 18-year-old girl. Both then began 3 years after the events. We had to wait until the year 2023 to know the end of this story. According to information, the media that witnessed the trial hearings were very intense days due to the amount of hard testimonies that were presented. On November 27, 2023, Ruben Oscar Avila was sentenced to life imprisonment for being considered the material and criminally responsible author of the crime of Priscila Alejandra Martinez. Different people who were present while the sentence was being read assured that Avila did not react upon learning of the sentence. Meanwhile, Claudia and Ana Martinez, the mother and aunt of the victim, were crying inconsolably. They had lost Priscila, but if we can call it luck, they obtained justice. The man's first presentations to apply for parole can only be made in the year 2053, meaning he still has a long time to go. On the other hand, according to the femicide report of Argentine Justice, the cases during the year, by the year 2020, just before this illness, Priscila was 15 years old, especially in the months of this disease, reached a critical level, identifying a total of 251 victims between January 1st and December 31. By the year 2020, just before this illness, Priscila was 15 years old. In fact, almost simultaneously with the discovery of Priscila's body, the femicide of Jessica Minaglia, a primary school teacher who was beaten to death by her ex-partner Pablo Núñez in the Argentine province of Santa Cruz, was made known. The man was a police officer who reported having found the teacher's body to distract the investigation, and for a while took advantage of his police influence until he was finally discovered and sentenced to life imprisonment in May 2023. But this is another story. If you want me to tell it, leave it in the comments. The crime of Priscila Alejandra Martinez was discovered on April 15, 2020. Just 3 days later, various organizations asked the Argentine national state to declare a state of emergency in gender violence. Between March 20 and April 12, 2020, a femicide was already being recorded every 32 hours in the country. This case was very shocking for many reasons. First, because of the trust that was had with the murderer, who interacted with Priscila and the entire family with total normality. Although there were certain suspicions about Ruben Avila. Obviously because no one imagined that it was such a sinister person because he was from the same family. And on the other hand, it is an investigation that became very complicated, both because of the pandemic and because of the actions of the police and judiciary, who in many of these cases do not intervene quickly. Even more so when it comes to low-income victims like Priscila. Thus, the investigation only got underway once various organizations carried out campaigns on social media to pressure the authorities. Remember that on this side you can find the members button where you can have access to different extra content that is not public. You can also have access to live broadcasts. It costs 50 pesos, around 50 Mexican pesos. Ikpan, we can say that it is something symbolic, but it helps me to keep growing. There is also my other channel called Revealed Portraits, which is on Monday and Wednesday. You can find it on YouTube, and this is like a guessing video. where together we are discovering who is the famous person I am describing or telling the story about.
Thank you.